What kind of billionaire stakes his entire future on a total stranger? And what kind of woman walks in, ragged, unexpected, uninvited, and flips his entire empire on its head? When Julian Carter stood before Chicago's elite and boldly declared he'd marry the next woman to walk through the door, he thought it was a joke, a spectacle. But when she entered, homeless, wide-eyed, carrying nothing but a torn backpack and years of survival, no one laughed. Not even him. In that moment, reputation shattered. Secrets surfaced. And the man who once controlled boardrooms with a glance suddenly lost control of everything. What began as a reckless dare soon ignited a scandal powerful enough to burn down careers, families, and the one thing Julian never meant to risk, his heart. But the real shock? It comes after the applause dies down, because what she does next will leave even the man who gave her everything speechless. What kind of man decides to marry a total stranger on a whim? And what kind of woman walks through that door to change everything he ever believed in? The Grand Oak Bistro sparkled under the Chicago skyline, golden lights flickering against tall glass windows, the clinking of crystal glasses echoing softly over whispered business deals and laughter of the city's elite. Among them, seated in a corner booth with a view of Lake Michigan, sat Julian Carter, a man who owned half the skyline. At 45, Julian wasn't just wealthy, he was a legend, a ruthless investor turned philanthropist. The tabloids called him the Ice King of Wall Street. But if anyone looked close enough tonight, they'd see that ice beginning to crack. He swirled a glass of Bordeaux slowly, watching the dark liquid swirl like thoughts in his mind. "You've got that look again," said Ethan Hayes, his longtime attorney and only real friend. "Trouble at the firm?" Julian sighed. "The business is fine, the legacy isn't." Ethan raised an eyebrow, still hung up on the air thing. Julian's jaw tightened. "You know how I was raised. My father passed the company to me, his father to him, but me? I have no one." "You have Chloe," Ethan reminded gently. "Your daughter is brilliant, Julian." "She could." "It's not the same," Julian snapped, his voice a little too loud. Several heads turned. He forced a thin smile, lowering his voice. "I love Chloe, but the board, the legacy, everything I've built, in their eyes it needs a son, a male heir." Ethan shook his head in disapproval. "It's 2025, Julian. That thinking is outdated and cruel." "Tell that to my father's will," Julian muttered bitterly. "He left me a billion-dollar empire and a burden I can't pass on." Ethan fell silent. He'd known Julian long enough to understand the guilt about his failed marriage with Sabrina, about the way he pushed her away, obsessed with continuing a name instead of building a family. Then, with a sudden spark in his eyes, Julian set his wine down. "I'm done waiting for fate to fix this," he said, his voice tight with a strange kind of excitement. "Let's make things interesting." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" "A bet," Julian said, turning toward the entrance of the restaurant. "The next woman who walks through that door, I'll marry her." Ethan choked on his drink. "Are you out of your mind?" "Probably," Julian smirked. "But I've tried logic and legacy, and now I want something unpredictable. What if she's whoever she is, she'll be mine." And then the door opened. Time seemed to freeze. A hush fell over the room as a figure stepped inside, not a socialite in heels or a high-powered attorney, but a woman with tangled dark hair, dirt-smudged jeans, and a face both young and worn at once. She didn't belong here, and every person in the restaurant knew it. Amara Brooks had no idea that walking into that restaurant would change her life. She looked around nervously, eyes wide like an animal in headlights. Her hands clutched the straps of a torn backpack. Murmurs rose, a waitress began to move toward her, so did security, but before anyone could reach her, Julian stood. "Wait," he said, his voice echoing across the hushed dining room. All eyes turned to him. "I invited her." Even Ethan's mouth fell open. Julian walked straight to Amara, ignoring the gasps and whispers. "Good evening," he said, smiling as if she were royalty. "I'm Julian Carter. Would you care to join me for dinner?" Amara looked at him like he was insane. Her eyes flicked to the security guards, then back to the man in the $1,000 suit with the outstretched hand. Her voice was cautious, husky from the cold. My name is Amara." "Amara." Julian said, as if tasting the word. A beautiful name. She hesitated, then placed her calloused hand in his. Behind them, Ethan stared in stunned silence. What the hell are you doing? He muttered under his breath. Across the city, in a modest apartment in Lakeview, Sabrina Carter sipped her coffee and read the headline on her phone. Billionaire Julian Carter causes scene with homeless woman at Grand Oak Bistro. She blinked. Oh God, what did you do now, Julian? Back at Julian's penthouse, Amara sat stiffly on a leather sofa, staring at walls covered in priceless art. Why am I here? She asked. What do you want from me? Julian sat across from her, eyes sincere. You. I want to marry you. She stood up so fast, she nearly knocked over her coffee. What kind of twisted game is this? I'm not some joke you play to feel better about yourself. It's not a game, Julian said quickly. I made a vow, and you walked through that door. You don't even know me. Maybe I'd like to. Amara shook her head. This is insane. But something in his voice, something in the way he said it, didn't sound like manipulation. It sounded like a man who was tired of pretending he had everything when inside he had nothing. Still, she wasn't ready to trust him. Not yet. Not when her entire life had taught her that nothing came without a price. Meanwhile, Sabrina called someone she hadn't in months. Ethan, it's me. What is going on? You're not going to believe this, he said grimly. He's serious. He's really doing it. Doing what? He's marrying her, Sabrina. A woman he met last night. Sabrina's breath caught for a moment. The world tilted. She didn't know who this woman was, but whoever she was, she had just walked straight into a storm. Do you believe in love at first sight? Or is Julian just acting out of desperation? Amara Brooks didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of the luxurious guest bed in Julian Carter's penthouse, staring out the massive floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Chicago skyline. She didn't belong here. The sheets were too soft, the silence too deep. It was a far cry from the park bench she had curled up on just 48 hours ago. She kept replaying his words in her head. I want to marry you. It wasn't just absurd, it was dangerous. In the early morning haze, she found herself in the kitchen nursing a cup of coffee when Julian entered, dressed casually in a dark sweater and jeans, a stark contrast from the sharp suit he'd worn the night before. His eyes lit up when he saw her. Did you sleep? Amara didn't answer. Why are you really doing this? Julian hesitated. I meant what I said. I made a vow, and I intend to keep it. A vow? To who? Your ego? Your legacy? Or is this just some performance to fix the hole in your heart? The words stung more than he expected. Maybe all of it, he admitted quietly. But something happened when I saw you walk through that door. It wasn't just about the vow anymore. Amara folded her arms. You don't even know who I am. That's why I want us to spend time together first. No pressure. No wedding bells tomorrow. Just let me get to know you. Let's see if this crazy thing has a heartbeat. She stared at him for a long beat, her guard still up, but something flickered in her curiosity, maybe even longing. Fine, she said finally. But I need my own place, not this tower. Julian grinned. Done. What followed was the strangest week of her life. He moved her into a modest but fully furnished apartment near Millennium Park, comfortable, safe, nothing flashy. A wardrobe appeared, tailored to her tastes, and etiquette lessons were gently offered, not imposed. But Amara, despite the strange tenderness of it all, kept her distance. She spent her mornings walking, her afternoons reading in cafes, and her nights wondering how long before the real motive revealed itself. Meanwhile, the headlines wouldn't die. Billionaire walks the edge. New mystery woman in Carter's life. Is Amara Brooks the next Cinderella or the ultimate scam? Sabrina Carter saw every one of them, and every time something tightened in her chest. She hadn't seen Julian this animated in years, not even when their daughter, Chloe, was born. And now he was chasing a woman he barely knew, ready to hand her the empire he once guarded with iron fists. She picked up the phone. Ethan, I need to see her. Amara was sitting in a cafe when the woman appeared, dark blonde hair, sharp blazer, confident steps. Amara knew instantly this wasn't just anyone. "You're Sabrina," she said before the woman even spoke. Sabrina sat across from her. "And you're Amara, the woman my ex-husband met on a dare and decided to rewrite his future for." Amara raised an eyebrow. "You came to warn me." "No," Sabrina said, surprising even herself. "I came to understand you because if this is real, if you're serious, then you deserve to know what you're walking into." They sat there for an hour. Sabrina didn't try to tear Julian down. She told stories of his ambition, his obsession with legacy, and the way that obsession destroyed everything good in his life, including her, including their marriage. Amara listened without interrupting. When Sabrina stood to leave, she paused. "I don't hate you, Amara. I don't even blame you. But I need to know that you're not just a passing storm. Because my daughter, she's watching." Amara's hands trembled as she lifted her cup again. Suddenly, this wasn't a bizarre fairy tale anymore. It was real. It had consequences. That same night, Amara knocked on Julian's office door. He was on a call but hung up when he saw her expression. "What's wrong?" She walked in slowly. "Your ex-wife came to see me." He blinked. "What? Why?" "She wanted to make sure I knew what I was stepping into." She wasn't angry, Julian. She was heartbroken. He stood, rubbing the back of his neck. "Amara, I didn't mean to, I know," she said, cutting him off. "But this is bigger than you, bigger than me. You've got a daughter, a legacy, a whole history I'm just crashing into." He stepped closer slowly. "You're not crashing. You're changing it." Amara's voice cracked. "I don't know if I can. I've spent years surviving, Julian, not living. And now you want me to just step into this glass world and pretend I belong." "No," he whispered. "I don't want you to pretend. I want you to be exactly who you are." For the first time, she didn't flinch. But outside the door, Sabrina waited in silence, watching through the glass. And she wasn't the only one watching because across the city, in a dark office, an old man sat down with the newspaper headline and a bitter smile. "Julian Carter, always too sentimental," he muttered. Then he picked up the phone. "Activate the contingency plan. Let's shake the foundation of his perfect little fairy tale." What secret had Julian buried deep in his past, and what part of it was about to come knocking? How would you handle it if your ex showed up to confront your new partner, and they didn't try to fight but instead connected? Would that make you trust them more or less? The call came just after midnight. Julian Carter stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, the city lights of Chicago stretching beneath him like veins of fire. In his hand was a glass of scotch, untouched. His phone buzzed again, third call from Ethan in less than an hour. When he finally answered, Ethan didn't waste time. "We've got a problem." "How bad?" Julian asked. "Board-level bad. Someone's leaking financial records. They're trying to build a case that you've misused company funds to support Amara." Julian's stomach sank. Ethan continued, "They're painting her as a gold digger, a scam artist." Julian stared out at the skyline. He should have known this was coming. In his world, love wasn't allowed to look this messy, this real. "They're calling for an emergency board meeting tomorrow at noon, and they're demanding you step down." In a quiet cafe near Lakeview, Amara sat alone, her phone lighting up with headline after headline. Her heart pounded as she read the words. Billionaire's romance sparks financial scandal. The fall of Julian Carter, seduced by a stranger from park bench to penthouse. The truth about Amara Brooks. She barely noticed Sabrina Carter walk in and take the seat across from her. "I figured you'd be here," Sabrina said quietly. Amara looked up, her expression unreadable. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I know," Sabrina replied, "but the world doesn't care. They want a villain, and you walked in at just the right time." Amara stared at her. "So why are you here?" "Because I've seen Julian make every mistake a man can make. But I've never seen him fight for someone the way he fights for you. I think." "No, I know. He's never needed help more than he does now." Amara's throat tightened. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted a chance." "Then take it," Sabrina said. "Not just for him, for you." The next morning, the Carter building was surrounded by reporters. The boardroom on the 36th floor was packed with cold suits and colder eyes. Julian stood at the head of the long table, his tie loosened but his posture defiant. "I didn't misuse company funds. Everything spent came from my personal account. You brought chaos into this company, one board member sneered. You made a mockery of our legacy. I built this legacy, Julian shot back. And maybe you've forgotten, but it was built on risk, on doing what others wouldn't dare. Before anyone could respond, the door swung open. Amara walked in. Gasps rippled across the room as cameras clicked outside. Her voice was calm. I know I wasn't invited, but I need to speak. One of the members protested. This is private board business. She's staying, Julian said firmly. Amara looked at every person in the room. I don't want Julian's money. I don't want his empire. I didn't ask for him to pull me out of the shadows, but he did. And for weeks, I kept thinking he'd change his mind once he saw who I really was. She paused. He didn't. He just kept showing up. There was silence. I'm not the fairy tale you wanted, and I don't want to pretend to be. But I am honest. I've slept on sidewalks. I've been hungry. I've been invisible. And I would rather go back to that life than stand here and let you tear him apart for loving someone who didn't come from a country club. A long beat passed. Then the oldest board member leaned forward. Miss Brooks, if you're not after money and you're not after fame, why are you still here? Amara turned to Julian. Because I love him. But also because, for the first time in my life, someone believed I was enough. Not pretty enough, not rich enough, just enough. That was the moment everything shifted. The board voted, and against all odds, Julian kept his seat on the condition that he stepped back from day-to-day operations and appointed a co-director. He chose Chloe, his daughter. 3 months later, Amara stood in Lincoln Park in a simple white dress, the golden autumn leaves swirling around her. There were no TV cameras, no luxury gowns, no PR teams, just friends and family, the people who had stayed. Julian stood beside her in a gray suit, eyes soft, hands steady. Ethan gave a speech so unexpectedly heartfelt it left half the guests misty-eyed. Sabrina stood beside Chloe, who wore a dusty rose dress and held the wedding rings in her palm. When the minister asked if Amara took Julian as her husband, she laughed, not mockingly, just a sound of pure disbelief at how far they'd come. I do, she whispered. After the vows. As the reception carried into sunset, Julian and Amara slipped away to a small bench beneath the trees. No one followed. I still can't believe this happened, Amara said, leaning into him. Neither can I, Julian replied. But I'd do it all again, even the scandals, even the headlines, if it meant getting to this. She looked at him, her eyes full of something that had taken root beyond survival, peace. They didn't live in a penthouse anymore. They moved into a modest brownstone near Wicker Park. Amara refused to give up her job at the women's shelter. Julian started teaching one night a week at a local college. Introduction to Legacy Finance, rewritten with soul. Together they launched the Amara Initiative, a nonprofit supporting job training and transitional housing for women who had been through what Amara had. One day, Sabrina dropped off a donation envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. You didn't just save Julian. You saved all of us. Thank you, Sabrina. In time, even the headlines changed. Not Billionaire's fall, but Amara rises. Now it's your turn. Was this just a story? Or did it stir something deeper in you? Do you believe in second chances that defy logic, just like Amara and Julian's? Or are some wounds too deep to heal? Drop a yeb in the comments if their journey made you feel something real, and tell us where you're watching from. We're listening. And if you've ever been told you're not enough, or that love has an expiration date, share this with someone who needs reminding that the odds don't decide the ending, you do. Because in the end, it's not who the world thinks you are. It's who you dare to become. And sometimes, one impossible choice changes everything.